Just as we get going this morning, I'm just going to download some files that we'll be using with our exercises today. So I'll just pop those into our relevant folders. So I don't think I have a Gill Sounds one. Let's just call this week 3. So I can't remember what movie files they are, but anyway, it's all good. All right. Okay, now I'll just show you where we're at. So today will be our last week of just introductory After Effects exercises. But of course, we will be adding more and more as we go over the weeks. So we're going to be using a few programs today, as well as After Effects. But we'll also be using a program called Media Encoder, which we'll be using to trim some video, which is very handy. And I think it might be about it for the moment. We'll see how we go. What I'll do is I'm just going to open up in Illustrator this file. So let's just see if I can find Ewabi. Do a search for it. Yeah. So just to show you what we have and what actually eventuates, let's just see. Yeah. This was for a brand which was electric bamboo bicycles. And so I'm just trying to find here, let's just open up one of these. So there is a colour one. Where they are. It's been a while. Anyway, that gives you a fairly good idea. Oh, here we go. So this is with the brand colours. And so this was just social media, went on the website, blah, blah, blah. So what we have is an Illustrator file. Now, this artboard is set at 16:9, so just having a look at it. The artboard is set at the size that it's going to be used in After Effects. So handy hint, if you're creating any brand identities or things, save it as a new file and set your artboards to the size that it needs to be. So whether that's the stories, which is the vertical portrait, which will be 1080 by 1920, or square. So I'm not sure. Instagram used to be always square, so I used to set my artboards at 1200 by 1200. This one here I've just set at 16:9, which is 1920 by 1080. What I also have is a series of layers that are strokes, bits and bobs which work their way together, just knowing that to animate these elements independently, I set them up on new layers. Now, also knowing I'm going to be doing something called a trim paths, which is essentially a line that draws itself in After Effects. Okay. And so I can only have a single line. So to add the extra elements, this will be a path. Then there's the letter I, and that has its little serifs at the top. And then there'll be this bit of text. Now, I've outlined this text. Now, just know, even if your type in After Effects is editable, when it comes over, when your type in Illustrator is editable, when it comes over to After Effects, it will no longer be editable. So if we wanted to do any of the text animations that we did last week, then we would generate the text inside After Effects. Okay, and we've got all that scope to do things. But this is just the shapes and elements. Now, we'll see how we go, but I'll bring all of this in. The other thing to note is this shape is there for reference, but in After Effects, I would just create my composition background color, this color. So what I'll do is I'll just have a look at what the hex code for this is. And just quite simply copy that. Okay. So I'll set up a new After Effects file. I'll just save it as, just remembering it doesn't have a name. So I'll just call this Ewabi, trim paths 01, and put it in our folder. Okay, so nothing exists. So I'll come in, create a comp. Let's call it Ewabi 01. We've got our comp settings. I'll come in here. I'll just paste that hex code in there. And let's just make this 20 seconds, so 2000. And we're right to go. So just over here in the Moodle. Okay. So I'll bring in this Illustrator file. So we have done this a couple of times. Let's just talk about it again. I'll do this a long way around. We can drag and drop, but it's important to know that this Illustrator file needs to be brought in as composition. This will retain all of those layers. Okay, footage is based, we will be doing this later when we bring in a video file and we start playing around with video a bit later, and audio. comes in as a single layer with footage. So if I had my Illustrator file as footage, all of my layers would be compressed onto one layer. So I wouldn't have the flexibility to animate them independently. I won't tick any of these boxes. I'll bring it in. Now, I won't go through all of this. Once you actually see the basics, we can move forward. So I might just bring in the first layer, which is this pulse. Let's have a look at this file. Okay, there it is in Illustrator. It doesn't have any other capabilities other than the basic transformations, position, scale, rotation, opacity. Okay, but what we can do is we can actually bring this, convert this Illustrator file into an editable After Effects file. And I'm going to do that. So just watch this. It's going to be a right click on the layer. So just everyone watch what I'm about to select. So I've just right clicked on this Illustrator layer. I'll go create shapes from vector layer. So just take note as to what happens to that layer in the timeline once I do this. Okay, so firstly, you can see it's actually duplicated the layer, but changed it. And it's hidden the Illustrator layer. So I don't actually need this now. I can just delete that. If I need it again, I can drag it back from my file if I need it again. But what we now have, we open up this layer, we now have contents as well as the transform. So in here, we have the path, we have the stroke. So now I can actually edit the color if I needed to, or even animate the color, changing from one to another. I've got my stroke again, which I can animate. Okay. We'll talk about some of these other things in a moment. Actually, I will just quickly talk about this. So at the moment, this stroke that has come from Illustrator, it had a cap on it, or caps, so rounded ends. But we have this beautifully named butt cap, which is just a flat end. Okay, and so we can't animate going from flat to round, but we can choose one or the other. You'll note that it's now a stroke. I'll just show you this one here. There's this one called a taper. All right, again, it has so I can actually taper the line. Not only that, I can animate that taper. So that's the start length. There's the end length. We'll talk about the possibilities there a bit later. But just knowing now I have this fully editable stroke in After Effects. Okay. Now, what I'm about to show you is one of the go-tos that you'll see many times when you look at motion graphics and branding commercials on YouTube or television, whatever. Okay. This doesn't quite look centered. Let's have a look. There we go. So I've just centered this to the comp. Now, what we have, I can't emphasize how big this is, what I'm about to show you. I'm going to add. So last week, we were adding things like the tracking to the type where we could animate the spacing between the letters. There's a whole range of things we can do here. We'll talk about the twists and the wiggles and the zigzags a bit later, but this thing here called a trim paths will be your next favorite thing that After Effects can do. So the trim paths, to explain this, and I'm just opening up the trim paths, you'll see that I have a start and an end. Okay? I'll try and explain this. But the start is the very, very, very first anchor point. Okay? And you'll note that the start is at 0%. So this is in the trim paths. Add trim paths. So we're in this now is editable section. The end, which is the last anchor point, is at 100%. Now, if I could try and explain this, for me to see this line in its entirety as it's supposed to be, the start needs to be at 0%, the end needs to be at 100%. That is the full line. Okay? This will make sense in a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate. I'll animate the end, actually. I'll do this a few times. So let's just say I'll come to 2 seconds. I'll click on the end. So what I've just done is added that keyframe of the end at the 2 second mark. I'll now come back in time to, I'll do half a second. Okay? And I'm going to make that end 0%. So the end is going to the beginning. So if I scroll this, the end is at the same point as the start. So if I just tap my space bar, that line's just drawn itself. Well, it's the very first point.
So you like that.
Well, when I've drawn this in Illustrator, it's the first point I've made. Yeah. I'll show you a few variations of this as we go. So now let's just say I'll go forward a second. I'll animate the start. And now the start is going to go to the end. So the start has gone to the end. Now, if I want to overlap that, okay. So essentially what's happening is, well, I'm animating the stroke. If I wanted, let's just say that I want the actual start to be visible as a cap, then maybe what I would do is, let's see if I can do this, 0.1. So what that is, it's the minimum of the stroke that I can pop in there. So I could have this fade in, of course. I will do that in a moment. And let's just say we'll go here and I'll make the start 99.9. So the start isn't fully at 100%. And so what I can do is well, let's just try a few things out here. So I've got the start and the end. So it's a stroke that is animate. All right, so you can have a bit of fun with that. Now, of course, if we put our easy ease in there, and our motion blur, so let's just come back to the first one, put a motion blur on there. All right. Yeah, I expect that. I'll get there. Now I'll do, while we're here, just to show you what we have. Let's just we'll just create a circle. I'll just create a circle first. We don't necessarily have to change the anchor point, but let's just do that. I'll take the fill off the circle. I'll give it a stroke. Okay, let's say we're here. So here's this ellipse. There's the stroke. I could put a round cap on it. We'll do the same thing. We'll add a trim paths. Okay, so watch the process. We've got the trim paths. Go for the end. Bring back the beginning. Okay, so what I have is a stroke that's drawing itself, the trim paths. Okay. Again, we can come to the end. Let's just say we'll do that. Get our start. So the start starts at there. And we'll have the start going to the end. Seeing how we go. Okay. So essentially what I'm doing is have I shown you this? So just watch what I'm about to do. I'm going to hold the Option key down with my finger. So I'm going to select all of my anchor points. And with the Option key, see what I can do? I'm moving and scaling all of those keyframes with reference to each other. So I can play with the speed. Okay. Same deal. Let's just come over here. Just with those. Put an easy ease on there. Put a motion blur. See how we go. Okay. Oops, I didn't. Got to sort of play around and test things. So I think actually what I do here is I'll make that 0.1. Oh, let's just do that. Okay. So I can just essentially just leave things there. Now, just to complete this, you'll note that the starting point for the circle just happens to be at the top. Now, if I wanted to move that starting point on a circle, which in a sense doesn't have a beginning or an end, I've got this thing called offset, where I can move it to 90 degrees or wherever I want it to start. Okay? Pardon? It's a circle because what it should be is the beginning and the end is almost the same. All right, so at a well, what it is this the end point. It should be why it's not that. It should be at least 0.1. So that I would probably say would be 99.9. There we go. So what it is 0.1 of a cap. So all it is the front and the end caps together with the tiniest of strokes between. Okay. So a trim paths, and if we just come back here, is essentially a sequence drawing itself. And so let's just see if I've got here. I'll just say this for a moment. I can only have one After Effects file open at a time. Okay, so if I want to open up another one, so the Illustrator file has actually, it's worth actually talking about this. So the Illustrator file is unlinked, and it actually really needs, actually it doesn't really, because I think I've created all of those elements, but if I wanted to bring this back, I'd need to find, is that Ewabi 1 AI? It might not exist on this hard drive, but doubt it does. Let's see if it is. Yeah, it doesn't look, actually, unless it's in here. Yeah, so it doesn't, it's not on this file. Anyway, shouldn't matter because I'd already converted these. So let's just see what we have. All right. Maybe not. Open up. Without looking for the file. Okay, so what I'll get you to do, just as a bit of an intro, so you can, I'll do this again. So let's just set up a new comp. I'm going to do it all from the start if you need help. Okay, so I'll call this Ewabi 2. I'll actually bring in actually, do you want me to do the pulse one again? Who wants me to go through the pulse again? Okay, so let's just bring that in. All right. So it's an Illustrator file. I'll convert it to, I'll bring it into After Effects and convert it to that vector file. So I'll right click on the actual layer, the Illustrator file layer in the timeline. I'll come up to create, and I'll create shapes from vector layer. So this open up. We drag in the font, basically, and open the layers. Drop down and drag in U1 pulse. That's all right. And so go create shapes from vector layer. And you can see that we now see this as a stroke. In the timeline layers, it's created a new layer. It's converted it. The original Illustrator file is still there, but it's actually hidden it. So I can just leave it hidden, but I can also just delete it. If I did need to bring it back, I could just drag it back in from the comp, okay? So it's not lost. Outlines now. Okay, now if I open up that drop-down menu, you'll see that I now have the add as well as all the information about this converted vector layer that now exists in there. So again, I could animate the stroke going from 0 to 1. Okay. I could animate the color. I won't worry about that. But here in the add is the trim paths. Okay. And so the trim paths then allows us, and we'll see here, we open up the trim paths, we have the start and the end. So just remembering the start is for us to see the line in its entirety. We need to see the start at 0, the end at 100%. So just to create a little variation on this, I'll do this a little differently this time. I'm going to animate the start and the end. So at this 2-second mark, I've created keyframes for the start at 0% and the end at 100%. Okay? I'll just do this and then I'll come around. This time, I'm going to make the start, watch what happens here. I'm going to make the start at 50%. And I'm going to make the end at 50%. I can just type those in. So now look what happens. So it started with 50%, so it's halfway. So it's both the start and the end that are animating. Okay. So just depending upon how you want to bring these in, we can animate. All right. So I might just pause that there. I'll just come around and assist. But if you like, you can be playing around with other trim pathy type things.